What's up, everybody? I'm a little bit nervous today. I'm going to tell my story of what happened to me and how I found transurfing. The reason that I'm going to tell this story is because, well, first of all, I've never talked about this publicly. Really, only the people in my immediate life know about this. A few friends, my partner, my parents. But I wanted to talk about advantage, and I wanted to make this video specifically for a few people who have messaged me and told me about really crazy shit that happened to them, and they're having a hard time seeing their way out. And I know I've been talking a lot about connecting with your higher self, connecting with some of those higher life tracks, and that it really has to do with looking forward and not looking behind you. And how I actually ended up here is a really, really, really crazy story. So I wanted to share it specifically to help the people that are going through something crazy right now, and to know that it's all happening for the best. And once you listen to my story, maybe you'll understand what I'm talking about and how exactly you can connect with your higher self. But sometimes you have to go through a lot of crazy shit and a lot of trauma and a lot of breaking down everything in your life, like literally starting from nothing and then building back up, which is what happened to me. So, as I'm sure some of you know, I kind of lived like a very lower middle class, poverty level childhood. I managed to find myself to Los Angeles, where I lived the majority of my adult life. When I moved to LA, I was completely dependent on a husband that I had married extremely young, and I had nothing. I didn't have any money. I didn't have an education. I didn't even graduate from high school. Like, literally, I was dependent on this person for my survival, and he took advantage of it, and he treated me really, really bad. Like, I was severely abused emotionally and physically for a number of years. And yeah, it was very, a lot of stuff happened with his family. Anyway, it was, when it finally ended, I was about 24, 25 years old, and it ended in a really, really dramatic, bad way, where I was left with nothing. I was left with no money, no car. I was left in the apartment that we had together, and the mortgage was due, or the rent, sorry, and I didn't have any way to survive. And I managed to find myself to a restaurant where I started serving, waiting tables, and I did that until I found a job in a pawn shop selling jewelry, high-end jewelry on eBay for the pawn shop owner. So I learned about the jewelry trade. I'll speed things up a little bit. Over the next year, I learned everything that I needed to know to start my own business. And then I went to downtown Los Angeles and I started dealing on my own. And I created a business. It was pretty lucrative, really helped me financially. I started to live a really good life for myself. I started to build a reputation and a name in the business, and I found myself away from, a huge amount of debt and living poverty level, really. So I worked this business pretty intensely for the next 5 years. I was living a good life. I was single a lot of the time. I got myself into a relationship, though, when I was in my early 30s. That was a very, let's just say there was a lot of illusion there that I bought into because of my importance levels with money. I became a mistress, really, to a very, very wealthy man who was extremely powerful in Los Angeles. And I didn't know this, though. I didn't know that I was a mistress. I actually thought that I was in a loving, committed relationship that just had some hurdles to get over. Anyway, long story short, I ended up spending 5 years in a relationship that I thought was going to be the relationship for the rest of my life, get married, spend the rest of our lives together. Little did I know, I was just a mistress and I didn't know it. When I finally realized it, I tried to get myself out of the relationship, and it was very challenging because, again, this person was extremely powerful, didn't want to let me go, and I really struggled with trying to separate myself, not only from this person, but from all the importance that I had placed on wealth, status. I was in a very, it's hard for me to put it into words now because my mind just isn't there any longer. But at the time, I was so focused on becoming this image of myself, being, respected and wealthy and, taken care of and have all the things that I want. And things were just really, really fucked up. I had a lot of misguided intentions. Anyway, I tried to get away, and really the only way that I felt I could get away was to get into a relationship with somebody else. So I got into a relationship with somebody else that was not good for me. It was not intended for me. And again, this person treated me really poorly. I was just in a cycle of being treated poorly emotionally and having too much importance on security and needing someone. And it was really, just looking back on it now, even talking about it is a nightmare. I can't believe that I used to live with that level of importance on other people and all the things that I had importance on. So I got myself into this relationship with this other person, and this is where my story really begins. About a year into the relationship, this is where the story, in my opinion, where my reality offered me a track at the time that looked like it was the end for me, like it was really the bottom track I have ever been on. And my reality offered this to me as a gift. And I know this sounds a little bit like, how can that be a gift? But this is where I'm gonna take off. This is where my reality really forked off in a completely different direction. So about a year into the relationship, I developed this condition called, I can't even remember the name of it now, angioedema, hereditary angioedema. So one night, and we'll show a picture, one night my eyes swelled up so big that you really couldn't even see my nose. My face sort of disappeared and I kind of looked like the Elephant Man, and it was extremely painful. And sorry, I'm getting a little emotional talking about this. It was really a very crazy thing that happened to me. So I went to the hospital and they put me on a bunch of intravenous steroids and antibiotics and antihistamines and all kinds of stuff, and I couldn't breathe. My throat was closing with like everything from here up was pretty much just swelling out, and I couldn't breathe. So I went to the hospital. I stayed overnight. They gave me a bunch of stuff, and I went home the next day. So then it took me like maybe about a few weeks to heal from that event, but then they started to happen more frequently, and my whole life pretty much just shut down. I had no energy. I was constantly in a state where my face was just puffed out huge. I had all sorts of autoimmune issues going on. I wasn't sleeping well, just like it was really a nightmare. So this person that I was with, that I wasn't intended to be with, ended up getting into a relationship with somebody else, and like falling in love with somebody else and cheating on me while we were living together, and I was going through this stuff. So I left, and I got my own place. So I was alone at this point. And this is where I really hit absolute rock bottom. So I was devastated from the relationship ending, and it wasn't because I was intended to be with this person again. The relationship wasn't right for me, but I was just tremendously alone. I felt extremely vulnerable. The few friends that I had in Los Angeles had moved away, and all of a sudden, I just felt extremely isolated, extremely alone, and it was really horrible. I had another episode of this thing that was happening, this hereditary angioedema. It's an autoimmune disorder. You can look it up online. It's really crazy. People's whole faces and hands and feet swell up, and it's really wild. Anyway, I had another episode of this, and I went to the hospital again, and the doctors recommended me to take this steroid. So for a prolonged period of time, I think it was like 2 weeks or whatever. So I had rejected the steroid before. I didn't take it because I was kind of a holistic person. And I heard some things about this drug, and I didn't want to take it, but since I was alone and I was actually scared of dying at night, because when this thing would happen again, my throat would swell up, so I was like scared of being by myself and maybe getting to a point where I couldn't breathe, and I would not even be able to call the ambulance. So I decided to let the doctors have their way and take this medication. So what happened after that, I'll tell you from my perspective until I found out what was really going on. So I went back home after the hospital, and I was in hell. I mean, I was really in hell. I was alone. I was miserable. I was having crippling depression and anxiety. Somebody had, not even a close friend, but somebody that I had spoken to on the phone about something. I can't even remember why I was speaking to them, but I was speaking to them about living in Los Angeles, and this person said to me, well, maybe you should consider leaving. So I laughed, and I was like, well, everything I know is here. I've spent my entire adult life here. My business is here. How would I possibly survive? So after this conversation, things really took a turn for the worse. I started having extreme insomnia, and days and days and days went by where I did not sleep. And I felt like I was losing my mind. So I had few people to talk to. I would go walk around during the day, because after having like so many nights of insomnia, I didn't trust myself anymore to run my business. So I completely stopped doing business. And I was just kind of like wandering around the streets of Venice, not sure what the hell was going on. I was very, very scared. I was extremely emotional. My emotions were going up and down like crazy. And the nights were absolutely hellish. So I would sort of gather myself a little bit during the day, and I could at least function enough to like take a shower and eat something, even though my weight was like really plummeting. I got down to like less than 105 pounds. I was really just wasting away. And I would sort of gather myself during the day to the best of my ability, maybe even look like things were okay. Sorry guys, my nose is running. Hang on one second. So, but the nights were like really, really hellish, and I hadn't been a believer in God or anything like that, but at night I would sort of descend into this like maddening state where my heart would just start to race as soon as I saw the sun start to set. And I would just start questioning everything about my life, like what happened to me as a child, what had happened to me living in LA. I was trying to figure out like where everything had gone so wrong, like how I was alone, how I was just desperate to find, I had no meaning in my life at all. I was desperate to find some reason of why I was going through what I was going through. I felt like I had tried so hard to like get myself to a position where I could be happy. I was in therapy for years trying to overcome abuse and trauma from my childhood and like some really bad shit that happened. And I couldn't figure out any answers. I was like really just nothing was making sense to me. All I could figure out is that I hadn't been living my life the right way, and I was being punished. And every path that I had chosen, I had taken the wrong. Every fork in the road that I had been given, I had taken the wrong fork, and I was being punished by God. This is what I thought. I was being punished by God, and I was losing my mind. So this went on for about 30 days. And when I say 30 days, I mean 30 days of no sleep, 30 days of wondering what the hell was going on. It was horrible. It was, if you know of the term, the 25th hour. I was in my 25th hour. I didn't know what I was going to do. I started having suicidal thoughts. It was absolutely like the worst thing, the worst place I'd ever been in. So one night, the last night that I was in Los Angeles, I got on my knees and I just asked God. I was like, God, please help me. Please point me in the direction. Please help me understand what's going on. Like, I need help. I need guidance. And it was not like me to pray. So the voice that came back said, leave. Get in your car and leave. So as soon as the sun rose in the morning, I woke up. I had 2 cups of coffee. I hadn't eaten in days. I hadn't slept in days. I literally packed a suitcase and I threw it in the back of my car. I had an apartment that was like $5,000 a month. I had all this furniture and stuff, and I just literally left it. Like I packed my bag, I put it in the back of my car, and I drove up to my parents' house, who live about 5 hours north of Los Angeles. So when I got to my parents, they were extremely concerned about what was going on with me. They saw how much weight I lost. They saw what condition I was in. And then this thing started happening to me that it's called brain zaps. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. But what happens is when you're sleeping or when you're laying down in bed, and as soon as you start to fall asleep, you get like this electrical surge to your brain, and it literally feels like a bolt of lightning hits you every single time you start to fall asleep. So this started happening to me, and it was terrifying because not only was I suffering the month before from insomnia, but now my body was trying to shut down, but something was happening, like with my brain synapses that were firing and making it to where I couldn't go to sleep. So went through this for like 2 nights at my parents', and then finally my parents said, I think we need to take you to the hospital. So in the morning, my mom took me to the hospital, and it was really, really upsetting. I had to sign myself over to the state of California because Kaiser, the hospital that I'm a part of, labeled me as being gravely disabled since I hadn't slept for over 30 nights. And they said that they couldn't send me home because they felt like something bad would happen to me. I would crash a car or stab myself or something. I was not in a position where I could be trusted to be alone for a number of reasons, but mainly because I was so unbelievably sleep deprived. I was starting to become like delusional. So they admitted me to a psychiatric hospital under the term gravely disabled. In the United States, if you have extreme insomnia, they treat you in a psychiatric hospital. So they admitted me to a psychiatric hospital. It wasn't against my will. I went willingly, but again, I had to sign myself over to be a ward of the state, meaning that I could no longer make decisions on my own. I had to allow the state of California to make decisions for me. So being a successful person, an independent woman, making my own way in life, running my own business, living independently, having my own money, really just running my own reality, to have to sign myself over to become a ward of the state was probably one of the hardest things that I had ever done. Now, it only lasted for 24 hours. I was transported about 90 miles away from where my parents live via ambulance to a hospital where I was admitted. They immediately gave me a bunch of tranquilizers to knock me out. And when I woke up in the morning, it was like the first time I had had any sleep in over a month. So when I woke up in the morning, I was extremely confused. I knew that I was in a hospital, but I didn't understand exactly why I was there, like how it had happened. A lot of things were spotty to me. And it was very, very upsetting. I was wondering why, again, this had happened to me. I had been living a good life, even though I was depressed and upset in Los Angeles. Things hadn't gone my way. I was thinking about all that I had left, a business and my home and all that stuff. So I really was again just questioning what the hell is going on here, right? I didn't understand how I could have been there and then end up where I had ended up. So I met with the doctor, the psychiatrist. It was on staff that day. And he started asking me a lot of questions about my past, and I really thought that something had snapped and I had sort of gone crazy. Well, then he asked me about medication that I had been taking, and I told him about this steroid that they had given me because of this thing that was happening with my face, the hereditary angioedema. And then he said that I didn't belong in the hospital, that I was actually having a reaction to the medication that they had given me, and that it was a very common side effect for people to plunge into a pharmaceutically induced mania and have extreme insomnia because of this medication. So it wasn't that I had lost my mind at all. It was that I ended up in a very vulnerable position, feeling alone, being scared about my direction in life and a bunch of things that I was questioning in my reality. And it just so happens that coincidentally, the same time, the doctors give me this fucked up medication that sends me on one of the most nightmarish rides of my life. So they released me from the hospital the very next day. I had to stay 24 hours. They released me. My dad picked me up from the hospital. He took me home to their house. But I knew that I could not go back to LA because even though it was the medication that had caused me to sort of lose my mind, I really had thought about everything in my life. I started to question everything. I started to really wonder where I was going, what my purpose was, why things had ended up so badly for me, emotionally and spiritually, why I was void of anything that had any meaning in my life. I mean, I really did question absolutely everything, and I knew that I would not go back to Los Angeles. But I did not know what else to do. I had my apartment there, I had my business, I had everything, and I left it. I went up to Oregon where my grandparents lived, and I started a very slow and long process of recovering. I didn't heal quickly from what happened with the prednisone medication. I had all sorts of crazy things psychologically happening to me, and insomnia still was persistent for like another 6 months after that. One thing that did happen, well, first I went back to LA for 2 nights to pack up all my stuff, and I sold everything. I got rid of everything except for like some books and some of my artwork, all of my clothes and shoes and restoration hardware, furniture, and all the crap and material stuff that I had collected. I literally just sold it for like nothing, and I purged myself of like every material possession from my life. And I started watching, when I got back to my grandparents, I started like trying to find stuff on the internet to help me rebuild, because I did not know what I was gonna do. I was like without a job. I mean, I did my business still a little bit, but I knew that like it wasn't providing my heart and soul with anything. So I knew that I needed to find something else, and I just felt like something was out there. I just needed to connect with it. So I started watching lots of different videos, and I came across these videos by Bob Proctor where he was talking about changing your paradigm or shifting your paradigm. And I was like really trying to understand. I knew what he was saying. I was like, okay, I need to shift my paradigm. I knew what he was saying, but I just didn't understand how to do it. So I was like still really confused. I had never, besides going to therapy, I'd never really tried anything with self-help, and I really just was in a place where I knew I needed something, but I just didn't know how to connect with it or what it was that I was looking for. So I kind of dropped it, and I started just trying to create something in my life that I could find some pleasure in and try to rebuild, really. So I started this business called Camper Van Chick, and I started flying to different states in the United States and buying these Volkswagen camper vans, Euro vans. You can check out my Instagram account to see exactly what they are if you're curious. But they're super cool. You camp in them. The top pops up, and it's like this livable space inside this little RV, and they're very collectible. People like them a lot, and I wanted to get one, so I found one, and then I put an offer. I found 2 actually, and I put an offer on 2 of them. Then I ended up getting both, so I decided to sell one and then use one, and then I sold one for a pretty good profit, and I started doing this frequently to make money, and it was really fun, and I started to feel some real heart and mind coordination about it, because I got to fly all over the US and pick up these vans and drive them back and stop at national parks and, you know, be on the road and stuff like that. And it really was sort of healing for me to be doing this, and at the same time I created a new way that I could make money that felt really good and wasn't about my old business. So I did this for a while, and then one night while I was in one of the vans, I didn't have any social media at the time, but I was like kind of bored one night, so I created a personal Instagram account, and I was looking on Instagram, and I was looking at this artist, this female artist. I think she was in like San Francisco or New York or something, and she had nothing to do with transurfing, but I was looking at some of her artwork and I was scrolling through the comments and somebody said on there, have you ever heard of reality transurfing? Now, this was like over 5 years ago now. There wasn't a lot of information on reality transurfing at all, especially in the US. There was virtually nothing. There was like one other person in the US that was online. She had made a couple of videos on YouTube and that was it. So I was scrolling through this Instagram feed. I see, have you ever heard of reality transurfing, asked to this artist. And all of a sudden, I just knew that I had found it. I knew that something very, very special had happened and that I had just connected with something that was not only going to change my life, but was going to help me help others change their lives too. And how I knew this, I have no idea. I really don't know how to explain it. I saw the two words, reality transurfing, and they looked like they were coming up out the screen, and they looked like they were, I want to say, almost in another language. It didn't look like English to me, but I knew what it said. And I really can't explain it, but I knew that a door had just opened. So I immediately did research. Obviously, I found Vadim's website, and at the time there was an audiobook on the first reality transurfing book, which was called The Space of Variations. So I started walking and listening to this book while I was living in Oregon, and I was walking every night, and I would put it on and I would literally walk like 10 miles and listen to this book. And every single point that Vadim made started to come together. There was absolutely no ambiguity about what I was hearing. I didn't find any of it questionable. I didn't find any of it not easy for me to understand. I started to see through my past of exactly what had happened. And I really started to accept that the reason that things had ended so poorly for me in Los Angeles, why I ended up in that space, why I ended up questioning everything and leaving everything and breaking down everything that I had built to leave and find something else. I really feel that all of that stuff needed to happen in order for me to take myself out of my environment and understand that I was not living in a way where I had purpose, or that I was connecting with that higher version of myself. Even though I had found success in certain ways, I was void. I was depleted of so much. I had no ability to not only help myself, but there was nothing inside to help other people at all. Nothing. I mean, even the thought of helping another person wasn't even something in my mind, because I was just so desperate to figure it out for myself. I was so unbelievably lost, and I needed to become that lost so I could venture out of the securities that I had built for myself and put myself into the alternative space where I could connect with something that I was ultimately to connect with. And once this started to happen, once I found transurfing and everything fell into place, and I realized all the mistakes I had made, all the pendulums I had gotten involved with, all the not trusting my world, living from scarcity mentality, living with limited thinking, living on tracks where I was constantly in an induced transition. I really understood why I had to feel all those things and go through all those things to connect with reality transurfing, to connect with this knowledge, but most of all, to be able to tell a story to anyone that needs to hear this. And that is that going down to zero or even in the negative, okay, this is a huge, huge blessing and an event that is to be celebrated if this happens for you. At the time when I was going through this stuff in Los Angeles before I left, I was convinced that this was the worst thing that had ever happened to me in my life. The absolute worst thing. I was convinced that I was going to die. I was convinced that I might commit suicide. I was convinced that I was not loved. I was convinced that my world was a place of scarcity and fear and had not taken care of me. Okay, and it is that extreme swing to the dark side that has helped me to be able to connect with this other side that I've now connected with. And the reason that I'm telling this story again is because a number of people have reached out to me and have told me that they are in that dark side. And I want people to know out there that this is to be used. This is something good. This is not only your chance to now rebuild because everything has been taken down, but you have the ability to take what you have experienced and what you have learned, no matter how different the circumstances are, because we all live in different parts of the world. Some of us live in war-torn countries. Some of us live in poverty. Some of us are struggling with our identity or our purpose. There's all sorts of ways that some of us have been left romantically with children. You know, some of us have had children die. Some of us have had spouses die. Some of us have experienced businesses failing and having to start out financially from ground zero. So there's a lot of different circumstances. But my story is that I had a little bit of everything. Again, I struggled with meaning. I struggled with purpose. I struggled with connecting with that higher version of myself. And my reality had to take me to that lowest version of myself to help me to understand there's power in that. There's power in that. That's not where I belonged. I belonged somewhere else, but I had to go through those things in order to create some fuel to send me on a trajectory upward to connect with the higher version of myself. And that's what I did. So since I found transurfing, I righted myself and my reality. I realized what I did wrong. I started building a new foundation. I started building a new structure. I completely shifted my paradigm. If I was existing, let's say this is ground zero, right, of where most people exist and where, I at my best existed was sort of on ground zero. I was down here, so I would live in this space. Maybe the absolute best I would get would be ground zero. Now I'm up here. My bottom emotions, my bottom track, if I go to an induced transition now, I don't even hit this space anymore. I'm still way in the positive. I never go down here anymore. This whole space, and this is why this has been a little bit difficult for me to talk about this on camera, because the fact that I lived in this space for so many years, for so long, I had so many pendulums on me, things were so fucked up, okay? The fact that I lived there for so long, the fact that I managed to get myself out of it, and now I've created this entirely new reality for myself. This space down here is not only confusing for me, but it's uncomfortable because I just don't exist there anymore. My depression is gone. My anxiety is gone. I sleep like a baby every night. I've aligned myself with my reality. I've aligned myself with my purpose. And that is to help others know that there is a higher version of yourself that exists that has a more divine purpose. And if you are in a dark place now, I'm congratulating you. You are in the best position you can possibly be in, because it is from here that you will rise. Sometimes everything has to come down in order for you to go back up. So of course the rest is kind of history after that, right? I started talking about transurfing. I started trying to help people connect with the higher versions of themselves. I moved back home to a place where I had once viewed as wreckage of my childhood, right? I'm connected with family again. My life has meaning. I feel happy every day. I feel content. I feel like I have coordinated my heart and my mind in a way now where I am truly, truly excited about what each day will bring me. I no longer have doubts. I no longer have fears. I no longer question why things have happened in the manner that they have. I realize that everything, all that shit that happened to me in the past, it all was for my advantage. It all was to lead me to reality transurfing and try to get this knowledge to others in a way that would benefit people. So that's why I'm here now, and I understand that, and this is my purpose, this is my intention, is to continue on as long as I'm feeling the heart and mind coordination that I feel now to get this knowledge to other people. And I know that I didn't go a lot into my past, like my childhood and stuff, and it's all pretty irrelevant now. I wanted to tell the story of how I got here specifically. But even if something is bothering you from something that happened to you when you were very young, like a child, like 5 or 10 or whatever, it's all for the good. It has brought you to this moment now where you are being given the knowledge that you have the choice. You can continue to look at things the way that you have and look at life as scary or disadvantage or unfortunate or not, that you have been unlucky, or you can view it that you have been given now the opportunity to view all of that stuff from your past as stuff that really ultimately is here for you now to do something positive with. So if you have an extreme story like mine, start using it to help others. And I know this can sound a little like, how do I do that? But just jump in somewhere. Maybe kids that don't have good families, maybe they need some mentorship. Maybe you can start doing what I'm doing, telling your story online. This was really challenging for me, you guys, and I don't know how many of you are still listening, but this was really challenging for me to do this just now, but I felt like it was the time. So put yourself out there, show others your ability to connect with your higher self, and maybe in doing this you can not only heal yourself, but heal other people. I am incredibly grateful to Vadim Zeland. I am incredibly grateful to the space of variations, or the alternative space, for connecting me with this knowledge in the manner that it did, in the time frame that it did. If it had happened a few years before, I simply would not have been in a place where I could have accepted it. So it all came exactly at the right time, and I'm going to continue on. This is my path. This is my track. I am here for everyone. If you've got something crazy that is happening to you or has happened to you, talk about it on the Facebook group and get it out, and let's all sort of look away from the past and the ways that it has affected us negatively, and start looking to how we can use it to fuel our future frames, our future realities, because this is really where it's at, everybody. I mean, this is really, really where it's at, is using that stuff as fuel now to put yourself into a better, more meaningful, more purposeful reality. So I'm gonna stop rambling. I'm sorry that I'm like a little bit shaken and my voice is kind of crackling and shit. This has been challenging for me to tell this story, and yeah, I'm curious to know what sort of things you guys have gone through, if anyone has you know, the ability to step forward and tell their story a little bit. But I just want everyone to know that there is a light, and you can connect with that, and maybe some of these tools that Reality Transurfing is offering will help you. So thanks so much for listening, guys, and good luck and good fortune on all of your journeys. I'm here for you if you'd like to reach out. Bye.